in this session, I'm going to use this time to talk through my experiment with ChatGPT. I regularly run experiments with ChatGPT as part of my job, or not necessarily part of my roles and responsibilities, but as a sole marketing manager within the team, supporting multiple products. It's really important for me to use the things that are available to increase productivity and help with kind of shortcutting through the large volume of work. You've been using ChatGPT since it was kind of first announced, and mostly use it as a kind of marketing executive, copywriter, and sometimes to support going through a lot of data. I don't often use it as a research tool because it tends to hallucinate. It's not great at giving sources. It's not great at reading multiple sources of data unless you feed that in. So I tend to be very controlled when it comes to like when it's working with large volumes of data, making sure that it's the data that I'm inputting that it tends to work from. So in this session, I'm just going to run through what I've been doing for the product side of the business. We don't have a large budget in the team. We certainly don't have the kind of budget that might be required to enlist the help of marketing and advertising experts such as Rory, Sutherland and Nancy Harhut. And these are two of my favorite professionals. The reason for that is that they both have a great deal of experience. They have been great about sharing their experiences, either through the books that they've published, through talks, through podcasts. And they're really grounded in a lot of observations in terms of behavioural psychology and kind of behavioural science. And that really interests me, especially within marketing. You need to learn these kind of tactics in order to make sure that your marketing really hits. And I think that's particularly important on the kind of B2B side, where there's a lot of information about how to really resonate with your consumer on the B2C side. Sometimes, and certainly when I first started out my career in B2B marketing, there really wasn't a lot of information about how to market to businesses, and we tend to see them as businesses and not as people. But I think the barrier for that has really broken down over time, and we're starting to treat business to business buyers as people, as individuals who can be marketed to in the same way that other consumers can. Now, typically, I tend to kick off my sessions with ChatGPT by providing this really long and lengthy prompt. Here I tried something a bit different, because when you start with a lengthy prompt, it does tend to just start kind of spitting out the answer that it thinks that you want, and at that point you're kind of like wasting time, and then you've got to kind of curb it back. So I started off nice and simple. Do you know who Rory Sutherland is? And ChatGPT was able to come back to me with some information, understand who he is, doesn't jump into anything too in depth, doesn't try to start summarize his teachings or anything, just tells me it contextualized, knows who this person is. And I really wanted it to embody Rory, because the purpose of this work is to get it to really critique the work that we're doing over in Made Tech Housing, and particularly to critique the positioning and maybe unearth new and different ways to position Made Tech Housing. And this is great for us because we're really in this kind of learning phase at the moment. We're still very much a startup. We're still going through discovery and product market fit alongside creating the product, which is pretty typical for early stage tech companies. So I fed it in these two documents, and what these documents are transcripts from different podcasts different podcasts that were published on YouTube. Nothing fancy here, literally just copied the transcription and yeah, fed this in along with this prompt. So I'd like you to embody Rory to help me with the branding and marketing challenges I have in Made Tech Housing. Yes, it did know the product well. We regularly, I guess, work together on some of the positioning and some of the challenges. So ChatGPT knows these products well. So I've attached the 2 documents with the transcripts. I want you to use this to help me consult, or to consult with me as if you were Rory. And as a consultant, I want you to share your expertise and examples as part of your guidance. I also want you to ask more questions before leaping into an answer. So when we do ideate and produce work, it's more thought through and accurate. So I'll break this down into the two parts. I want you to share expertise and examples as part of your guidance. Now, the reason this is important, and if you've ever watched a Rory Sutherland video, he gives tons of examples. He talks about different campaigns. He talks about why they worked, why they didn't work. So I really wanted ChatGPT to bring that through because I want to be learning alongside. I don't have time to, well, I probably do have time to watch 6 to 8 hours worth of videos and try and digest that. So I'm going to get ChatGPT to unearth those examples for me so that I can kind of lean back on them if I need to present this information again to other people. And this second part about asking me more questions, it kind of relates to what I said earlier, in that ChatGPT just tends to spit out what it thinks you're looking for. And sometimes that's not helpful. Sometimes you want it in a particular format. Sometimes it skips over some of the details because it's just like, oh yeah, I've done this before. I know kind of the kind of structure that you want. But to thinking about what a consultant does, well, a consultant is likely going to come in and ask you a ton of questions about your business to really understand what's working well and what isn't. So that's kind of why I said, ask me more questions before leaping into an answer. And it came out with these. I thought those were pretty good. And of course, it's got this contextual understanding of the product as well. So saying, what are your current perceptions of the market? How do housing associations and local authorities view Made Tech Housing? And it has given some prompts. You know, what are your distinctive features or idiosyncrasies of your products? Are there any things that make them memorable or uniquely positioned compared to alternatives? Where are you struggling most with adoption? How do you currently convey your value proposition? How much emphasis do you place on fame and distinctiveness? Now, the reason that it's asking these kind of questions and giving these kind of secondary prompts or information to it is because it's pulling out how Rory Sutherland speaks and how he thinks and how he describes those different case studies when he's talking. So these things that he's pulled out are very Rory in my opinion, and of course it explains, you know, why it's output this, like, you know, talking about Rory's principles, power of distinctiveness, psychological framing, fame as a shortcut, etc. And I was like, okay, this is pretty good. So I continued with getting the transcriptions, which took a bit of time, and fed that in. And I was like, I wanted to more deeply understand Rory Sutherland. I wanted to have more deep understanding of the different examples, the different strategies and techniques used within the marketing and advertising worlds. And I also explained here that the transcripts were mostly auto-generated and included commentary from the speakers on the podcast. And in the way that I formatted these, I included like the information from the podcast itself. So the overview of the information, or the overview of the episode, sorry, and denoted when the podcast started and ended, just to help ChatGPT understand the structured information I was feeding into it. And this kind of changed the questions that it was asking. So now it's got a deeper understanding. It started to bring in more examples, both from his teachings and also from what it knows about Made Tech Housing. So now we're saying things like, what's the behavioural hurdle? What assumptions are you making about your audience? What's your fame shortcut? We saw that before. What's maximizing your psychological value. Of course, you can see here that it's put in some of these different examples, and I can unearth these. I will just go in and type them into Google if I need to understand them more. But I can see it's pulling out this information from those transcripts. And then, how is creativity treated within your team? This may be not so relevant, but I'll still go with it for the purposes of the experiment. And then typically I would go ahead and answer these questions to help boost ChatGPT's understanding. But yeah, I tried something different here. I was like, I'm going to flip this back on you for a moment. How would you answer these questions? And it broke it down in a really interesting way, actually. Kind of to each of the questions, it gave its answer, and then also provided kind of Rory's take. And in these Rory's takes, it's providing like suggestions of how we could weave some of this stuff into campaign ideas, how we could utilize like kind of the fame shortcut, for example. I found this really interesting, and this kind of sparked the next part of this, which was to start to bring in another professional and another professional's take into this. And I was starting to really like feel the power of like, okay, where could I take this kind of like pseudo consultancy piece of work with ChatGPT? Now, I then took a bit of a pause here because this has taken me quite a while already. And I just went back in regards to the timestamps. Now, this was important because I want to make sure that I'm feeding in data into ChatGPT in the most like succinct way, but the way that's going to get like the best results. So I asked it for feedback on whether or not it was best to produce those documents with or without timestamps. And it kind of gave like a perspective on both sides. It did say that it was helpful for structure, helps with quick reference, but ultimately it kind of said that it didn't mind. And so I went back and said, appreciate you walking through the impact of the timestamps. I liked your suggestion with the timestamp, making it easier for us to both look at the same thing. With that in mind, I'll keep the timestamps in. And I also saw this as another learning opportunity to improve how ChatGPT and I kind of work together. And I said, here, if there's ever a way I could give you more or better structured data, please let me know. So I'm inviting it to critique the data that I put in to make sure that I'm going to get the maximum value out of my time working with ChatGPT. And then there's a bit of a reset here in some ways, because now I wanted to introduce Nancy. Now, Nancy Harhut, as ChatGPT is summarized here, is a well-regarded marketing and behavioral science expert. She has written the most excellent book. I have to recommend it to absolutely everybody who works in marketing. It has really changed the game for me, and I will continue to do work to more deeply understand and recall the concepts that she explains in the book. Understanding behavioral science in marketing, or using behavioral science in marketing, is it's well worth every single penny. So please go out and buy that book. Again, ChatGPT's already got a bit of an understanding here. I say an understanding, it's pulled some information off of Google about the concepts that Nancy often uses. And again, I fed in what was available in terms of kind of podcasts, talks, and the like from YouTube. I didn't feed in like a PDF of any of the book or anything. This is just using what was freely available online. And now, okay, I'm going back and asking ChatGPT here to present both responses, kind of, yeah, taking us through this again, taking us through the process again of consultancy, but now from the perspective of Nancy. And yeah, so it's presented it slightly differently. This is less like the question, less about the questions and then asking it to go back. It's put the questions and kind of the answers together. And this is what I would say is more akin to the part that said Rory's take. This, I guess, is kind of Nancy's take on all of these. But it is bringing out things that are more akin to Nancy. So talking about emotional drivers, leveraging decision-making shortcuts, urgency and exclusivity. These are things that come up time and time again in a lot of the talks that she does, and also feature heavily throughout her book. But I can see here that ChatGPT has a good understanding, although this probably hasn't given me the same kind of depth as the part above. And that is really largely due to the fact that I used a different prompt here. So I was a lot more brief in my prompt, and ChatGPT is using shortcuts to present that information back to me in a succinct way. So now that I've got these two kind of responses, I'm now trying to basically get an overview of what their suggestions might be. So these are like, how can I practically implement the things, the teachings and the perspectives of Nancy and Rory. And so it kind of like, it breaks them down here. So again, tapping into the emotional drivers. On Nancy's perspective here, we've got some example copy, creative idea, how this links back, and the same with Rory. And the next part of this, I think, is to tie in the questions that were asked by Rory, because at the moment we're just looking at the questions that were asked by Nancy, and to also kind of develop these creative ideas by I'll be critiquing them. Some of these work, some of these really don't work for reasons. So I basically, what I want to do, and I think where I'm going to get to at the end of this, is these are all the things that we're doing well, these are all the things that we're not doing so well, and these are the things that we need to change and why, and linking them back to the kind of behavioural psychology elements of those different campaign ideas. I then spent a bit of time here giving some feedback around how housing associations buy, the challenge of incumbent housing management systems. This is all stuff that, you know, we've been learning, and particularly bringing in some new stuff from discussions that we'd had at National Housing Maintenance Forum, just to help boost ChatGPT's understanding and to help really critique these ideas further. The biggest challenge is like, what do we do and say? Like, these are all great, but it doesn't overcome these kind of big challenges that I've mentioned. So what can we do or say to get housing associations to buy our product when they're stuck? And then I provided a little overview of some of the things that we do quite well that are different from housing management systems or other providers in the market. And then, yeah, it went into kind of talking more about these are different behavioral psychology kind of triggers, an overview of it, example messaging, both from Nancy's perspective and from Rory's perspective. And I think now in the interest of the time for this video, I'll kind of stop it here. But what I'm continuing to do, as you can see from this next set of links, is feeding in gradually more and more information to help ChatGPT really understand both Rory and Nancy's teachings, but also kind of the observations that we're making in the market and nuances about our product as well. And just one final thing, this here is a perfect example of why of how ChatGPT just tends to spit out the answer that it thinks that you want. So I asked it to read these articles what did it do? It gave me an overview of the things that were mentioned. Now, this is likely because I've given it feedback where it's like, if I give you these links, provide an overview, which is fine. But, you know, I hadn't actually asked it to do anything here, and it's already spitting out some information. So I hope that you found this helpful. I can provide a follow-up video as well of kind of how we got on. But yeah, this is definitely a work in progress. And I found it really interesting to try and train it almost like be another person, but being really hands-on and really thoughtful about the information that I'm providing it, the structure of that information, and the prompts as well, to really shape the output of it, and kind of, yeah, working together towards a piece of work that can really help us move things forward. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this really interesting, and yeah, feel free to message me if you have any questions.